Good morning mga katribo. It's Tuesday, 2 May 2023. Welcome to another episode of Daily Tribune Straight Talk where we discuss current issues that matter to each of us.
Yung Good morning, I am Gigi Arcilia. We are live on Daily Tribune's Facebook page and Tribune Now on YouTube. In this morning's episode is a post-Labor Day discussion on the labor movement. Our first of two guests is the legislative officer of the Office of Deputy Speaker Raymond Mendoza. Congressman Mendoza is the representative of the Trade Union Congress of the Philippines Party List Group.
Katribo, Carlos Miguel is Oñate, our guest. Welcome to Straight Talk.
Good morning, sir, and welcome to Straight Talk. And can you please introduce to us what TUCP Party List is?
Okay. Trade Union Congress of the Philippines is the largest labor center in the country, and we have the TUCP party list, which is our political arm that is have a representative in the House of Representatives, which is Deputy Speaker Raymond Mendoza, that has been serving for his now sixth term here in the 19th Congress. Now that we are still in the House of Representatives, now Deputy Speaker Mendoza is now part of the leadership as one of the House of Representatives Deputy Speakers, and we hope that we would be able to advance our labor advocacy not only through our on-the-ground labor movement and through our labor center, but also through the halls of Congress, that we would pass pro-worker legislation also in the House of Representatives.
Correct, yes. What is the distinction between TUCP and how would you, and as a party list and in terms of being a labor union group?
The Trade Union Congress of the Philippines, Party List Representative Deputy Speaker Raymond Mendoza is the lone labor representative in the 19th Congress. We are very much proud that Deputy Speaker Mendoza, as part of the leadership, is also forwarding pro-worker legislation. Much of our issues, especially as a labor center, we are dealing with the bread and butter issues of workers, everyday workers, the challenges that they face, and we also translate that to the macro perspective through policy making, through legislation.
And
So it's the largest, right? So what makes it the largest trade union in the Philippines?
Okay, it is the largest labor center in the country because we have more than 20 labor federations across the country. So we have, of course, the associated labor unions that have various regional offices across the country. We have also PTGWO and all other labor federations. If you would also remember, it was founded by Attorney Democrito Quito Mendoza back in 1974, the UCP Labor Center as the umbrella organization of various labor federations in the country. And now his son, Deputy Speaker Raymond Mendoza, is continuing the legacy of his father, not only through the labor movement, but also through legislation as a Deputy Speaker and representative of the UCP party list.
see.
So ilan po ba ang how many labor party list groups are there in Congress?
So far within the labor centers, there are 4 major labor centers in the country, which is TUCP, KMU, FFW, and Centro. Out of those major labor centers, it is the TUCP that only has a party list representative, but also we have also our allies that are also advancing pro-worker legislation, such as those in our friends in the Makabayan bloc, such as the ACT Teachers party list.
So may coordination then with the militant Makabayan block.
The TUCP, when it comes to pro-worker legislation, we seek to gather the most encompassing support from both aisles, especially if our goal is united and the same, such as in the case of yesterday's May 1 Joint Labor Day mobilization. The Trade Union Congress of the Philippines, alongside various workers' organizations and labor centers, march united as under the banner of the All Philippine Trade Unions to demand for better wages, advance new permanent and decent jobs, and advance labor rights as well.
Pero pero sir, kung you harmonize yung kanilang mga stand and yung TUCP, iisa lang din ba yung stand nyo pertaining to kasi yung kanilang, the demand of the mga kabayan is a 750 wage increase, whereas yung TUCP mas mababa, it's 150. So paano nyo i-reconcile?
Parang malayo yung
Ang layo.
difference.
Deputy Speaker Raymond Mendoza filed House Bill 7871, which is known as the Wage Recovery Act of 2023, which is a counterpart bill to Senate President Subiri. But we would like to emphasize that this is a wage recovery effort. The 150 pesos intends to recover, one, the purchasing power lost to inflation across the regions that average 73 pesos loss from the current minimum wage. For example, in the National Capital Region, your 570 in the minimum wage is only 482 pesos in terms of its purchasing power. What can your 570 buy? And second, it intends to recover those 34 years since the regional wage boards were established that there was no substantial wage increase. And as a wage recovery effort, it does not preclude the filing of petitions in our regional wage boards, which, as you have stated, may be bigger than our 150 pesos wage recovery increase that we are seeking. And as well as with regards to the Makabayan Block 750 pesos, their rationale was that it will approximate what we call the family living wage that is demanded by our Constitution and our laws such as the Wage Rationalization Act. As a labor movement, TUCP, alongside various other workers' organizations and labor centers, are very much welcoming all efforts to increase wages of workers, though we understand that there could be varying figures not only through legislation but also to the current wage hike petitions filed across the regional wage boards.
So how did you arrive with the 150 figure?
As I've stated,
Sa inflation
the
ban.
first component was the purchasing power lost to inflation. So you adjust your minimum wage per region per their regional consumer price index, which is the inflation. So that average, since this is a nationwide effort to increase the wages, so the average is 73 pesos plus the 34 years since the regional wage boards were established, that was back in 1989. So there was really no substantial increase when you compare your gross domestic product, your Philippine labor productivity skyrocketing, but then your wages are stagnating. So we would just like to ask 2 pesos for every year since 1989 that there was no substantial wage increase. So that's 34 times 2, that's 68 pesos. So 73 plus 68, that's 141 pesos, rounded up to 150 pesos.
Hindi ba considered as wage increase yung mga na-implement in the previous years? Like yung for Metro Manila, it's 570, di ba? It is nag-increase na siya from like how many years ago? Hindi ba yun counted?
Yes, it started 1989. That was the last legislated wage hike through the Wage Rationalization Act. They set the national minimum wage to 89 pesos. So it rose until now 570 pesos. But we would like to also emphasize more that this remains not substantial wage increases throughout the years, especially when you compare that, as I've mentioned, with your labor productivity. So your labor productivity is the contribution of your workers to our GDP. So for example, I think so, if I'm not mistaken, back in 2018, the labor productivity per worker or their contribution to the GDP was around 400,000. But then their wages, when you compute it as their annual minimum wage was only around 100,000 pesos. So the gap between their productivity and their wages are really large. And at the same time, if we go back again to our 1987 Constitution and our Wage Rationalization Act, primary in the criteria for minimum wage determination is the demand for a family living wage, which we know the 570 is not enough as a family living wage.
Yeah, I understand nga. Sa ibang regions, like BARM, 300 lang yung minimum wage.
With the level of inflation, parang maliit. yung 150.
And the discrepancy also across the regions, especially, for example, comparing National Capital Region versus Region 4 or Region 3, which is just some hours or minutes away from the Metro Manila, yet their wages are have large discrepancy. You have 570 in NCR, and around Region 3 and Region 4, around 460 or 470. That's 100 pesos gap just between those regions.
Does the party list, encourage or discourage ba, joining rallies?
The Trade Union Congress of the Philippines, as part of the labor movement, we also engage, through joint Labor Day mobilization, as we have shown yesterday. But that's under the united calls for better wages, new, decent, and permanent jobs, and advancing labor rights. And we would also like to mention, with regards to that, because the call there was STK, Sahod, Trabaho, Karapatan. And we would just like to mention that what is the international context of all this. I think it is in the news already, in the joint statement of President Marcos and President Biden, that in one of their commitments is that they would be establishing a U.S.-Philippines labor working group that will look into the labor rights in the country so that it's progressing. Why? Because the context of the U.S. international trade, where foreign direct investments, the president is pitching the Philippines to the world as an investment destination, is the fact that the U.S. trade policy now is a worker-centered trade. They intend to put workers front and center in their trade policy, and that we hope that this will promote race to the top labor relations both in our country and as well as in the United States.
Going back dun sa yung going to the streets to air their grievances and concerns, has TUCP been, kumbaga meron ba kayong pinipili ng mga instances that you'd rather not join? Kasi, labor masyadong very active kasi ang mga labor organizations in the Philippines. Like, every now and then we see them, nagrarally sila, they hold protests, on so many issues. So, ang TUCP ba, do you join all this protest or mga rallies that the other labor groups organize?
The Trade Union Congress of the Philippines has, for all these decades, have been advocating for industrial peace, which is founded on vibrant tripartism, constant engagement, workers, employers, and the government. And when it comes to airing our demands through protests, such as it often happens during May 1 Labor Day, we made it clear that it is only about pro-worker advocacies, so wages, rights, jobs, and not through other political
Walang halong
matters.
Wala nang sinasakyan pa na issue.
Ibang
It's
issue.
just all about
labor and
I
workers.
know what you're talking about. Kasi pag may mga rally, like sa Labor Day, ang daming kasaling nakakagulong issue yung tungkol sa ibang relations.
Nagkaroon na ng mga EDCA, mga gano'n.
Hindi na kailangan during Labor Day yun.
Kaya po yung dun sa Labor Day namin, yung STK, yun yung main, pati ho dun sa marching banner, yun yung main call, sahod, trabaho, karapatan. Those are all pro-worker, putting workers front and center.
Correct. Yes.
How would you know? Do you have a monitoring system to, na hindi na i-infiltrate ang TUCP?
The TUCP has always been, as you know, it's not vulnerable to those, so far, vulnerable to those, what you have mentioned, infiltration. But we would also like to, manifest our argument also against this, what could be prevalent red tagging and also labor rights violations when it comes to freedom of association and right to organize. Intervening in those labor relations have been already stated by our ILO high-level mission. So the International Labor Organization sent a high-level mission to the Philippines back in January, and one of their findings was that indeed there were many freedom of association violations, with regards especially to various workers' organizations and trade union centers. And that is why we are working closely together with the government and with our partners in the employers, because in the coming June, there would be an international labor conference, and the Philippines is duty bound to submit a joint implementation report on how we are doing with these recommendations. That is also in line with the recently released Executive Order 23 of President Marcos, which is establishing an interagency committee on freedom of association. But we do just like to manifest our lobby and our push for a workers' representation and as well as employers' representation in that committee in the spirit of tripartism and social dialogue.
Ano yan? ILO forum where you would submit the recommendations.
Yes, the International Labor Conference is akin to a UN General Assembly. So that is where all countries send their employers, workers representative, and government representative. And with regards to the ILO high-level mission, that is already the third high-level mission. So they're coming due to complaints about freedom of association. And we hope that we will be able to fully abide by their recommendations this time, because the next step could not be just a high-level mission, but a commission of inquiry that may refer the Philippines to a International Court of Justice.
I was just wondering, son, how can I call you?
Carlo na lang.
Carlo na lang. Ilang percent ang workers who are unionized in the Philippines?
That is actually the problem, as well as in the problem in the Asia-Pacific region, I suppose, because the union density, the latest, I think so, by 2018 is only 7%. So the reason being of that 7%, which is, as you know, relatively low union density, we would like to argue, is that the security of tenure of our workers are not provided. We have fought, Deputy Speaker Raymond Mendoza has always been spearheading the security of tenure bill. We have passed that in both houses of Congress back in the term of President Duterte, but it was vetoed then. But we would continue that struggle for the security of tenure bill, because we know that if workers do not have security of tenure, that seems to be the ultimate obstacle to their full exercise of their labor rights, right to organize, and freedom of association.
Speaking of regularization, so in government kasi, that's also a problem, yung regularization. So
Parang mas malaking
actually, ang daming mga contract of service, mga job order. So if TUCP is, isa yan sa mga pinupush na yung regularization, how would you go about, addressing that in the government sector?
Yes, no, our data latest is that we have more than 600,000 job orders, contractors, which are essentially your endo workers in the government. And you know that the government is the largest employer, therefore it could be the largest endo employer as well. Yet, you have more than 600,000 contractuals, yet you have more than 177,000 unfilled plantilla positions which are budgeted. That is why TUCP has also filed a bill. One is what we call civil service equivalency. When a government worker, such as for example your JOs and then your contractors, have been working in the government for at least 3 years of very satisfactory service as evaluated by his or her supervisor, then he or she must be provided a civil service eligibility and must be appointed to a permanent plantilla position, so that we address this pandemic of endo in the government as well. So the Trade Union Congress of the Philippines is also fighting for both security of tenure in the private sector through the security of tenure bill, then in the government as well through the civil service equivalency bill, and then we also have public service labor relations bill to champion the labor rights and concerns of our public sector workers.
So naka-file na yung civil service eligibility bill
Yes po.
for COS.
Yes po, matagal na rin pong pinaglalaban din ni Deputy Speaker yung sa private sector and then public sector workers.
When was this filed yung for government, for the government sector?
So for the government sector, this was filed. This was many of the bills are already further refiled because they are not being passed or they are not being prioritized in the previous congresses. But the civil service equivalency in particular has also, there was already a hearing on that by the Committee on Civil Service in the House of Representatives. Now we are just fine-tuning what would be the substitute draft bill, because the contentions would always come from resource constraints. We're saying the Department of Budget and Management, and then Civil Service, because they are arguing that the vacant plantilla positions, which are budgeted every year in our GAA, are not matching the job descriptions of our contractuals. But we would like to argue that many of the government contractors have been working for almost 3 decades there, and you cannot say that they do not have the merit and fitness to be a permanent plantilla position, a permanent government employee.
So does it mean creating new items for to accommodate this this qualified? Kasi if ganun nga kadami yung plantilla items,
600,000.
and then merong JO na nagtatrabaho na like more than 3 years, 5 years, so does it mean na dahil nga hindi siya ma-regularize, dahil hindi nag-fit doon sa bakanteng items, does it mean, pushing for creation of items that would match the skills?
We have been arguing that the starting point really is to first fill out the close to 200,000 vacant plantilla positions. Then later on, we could look into the creation of new items, especially many of the plantilla items are also not updated. They were decades ago. It was already rendered obsolete. So perhaps new items could also make our bureaucracy more responsive to the people.
That's right.
Government, yan,
So, nandyan ako dun sa next question. So, anong mga bills, mga pending sa Congress that the TUCP
It would address those problems that you have said.
Marami ba to? Ilan ba to? 2, 5 ang naka-pending?
Actually, we have been filing many pro-worker legislation since we are as I mentioned, Deputy Speaker Raymond Mendoza has been fighting for years, for many years, more than a decade for this legislation. But let me just mention our priority labor legislation when it comes to also in light of the ILO high-level mission, because that has one of the recommendations there is that there is a lack of meaningful progress in labor legislation in the country. So number one is of course the security of tenure bill that would end ENDO. Other pro-worker legislation would be one, the limiting the assumption of jurisdiction by the Department of Labor and Employment Secretary to essential industries, because now it is to industries indispensable to national interest. But then if the DOLE Secretary assumes jurisdiction over a strike or strike, the strike would be definitely ended. But we would like to limit that scope to only industries that are essential to essential industries. So for example, the water filling is not covered by the assumption of jurisdiction, because what would be covered is our major like life and death industries like power, water, but not right now. The practice is that the DOLE Secretary also assumes jurisdiction on matchmaking factories when we know that these are not essential industries. So another one would be the ease of union registration. We want to make registration of unions easier so that we would be able to rise up our union density, and that we believe that with unions, workers are stronger, they have more bargaining power for better terms and conditions of employment. We have also bill filed to lower the penalty for illegal strikes, so imprisonment is too much harsh for penalty for imprisonment. And with regards to public sector that we have mentioned, the Civil Service Equivalency Bill, and then the Public Service Labor Relations, the PSLR bill, because President Duterte ratified ILO Convention 151, which is our public service convention, which essentially states that if workers in the private sector have this set of labor rights, then we should also give that to workers in the public sector. Although there could be some nuances, as you know, government is engaged in public service, and there could be nuances compared to the private sector. So we have also filed that Public Service Labor Relations Bill. And lastly, we are also having House resolutions, rather than just bills, House resolutions expressing the sense of the House of Representatives to ratify 2 important ILO conventions. These are international treatises. One is the ILO Convention 81 on labor inspection, so that we have been doing labor inspection for all these years, but we need to align it with international labor standards. And then second one is the ratification of ILO Convention 190, which is violence and harassment in the workplace, because we know that we have many existing violence and harassment laws, especially against women, so that we need to put that into harmony we also with the international convention, and we believe that it is through this legislation that we can support President Marcos' earnest efforts to make the Philippines a priority investment destination, because we can be a model country with regards to labor rights and employment conditions and so forth and so on.
Anong status nitong resolution? Is it a resolution on, workplace harassment?
Okay. We're very much proud that the House of Representatives have already adopted. So if that's a bill, it's already passed by the House of Representatives, the ratification of ILO Convention 190, the Violence and Harassment Convention. But just like any treatises that need to be ratified, it must be forwarded to it was already forwarded by the Department of Labor and Employment to our DFA, and we hope that it would arrive to the table of the President for his signing, and then later on concurrence by the Senate, especially Senate President Subiri has already expressed support that he would vote for the concurrence of the ratification of ILO Convention 190.
So that's considering that, as you said, the level of unionized workers just 7%. Is that for the Philippines?
In the latest figures as of 2018, 7%
7% lang.
union density.
Out of the how many labor unions yan?
That's across the Philippines, but our number of workers, if we base it in PSA, that's around 50 million, 50 or 55 million.
So half pala ng population of the Philippines, labor force
Labor force. And only 7%
are registered.
Part of the reason as well, as I mentioned, is the lack of security of tenure. We have pandemic of endo workers.
And mga outsourcing.
Yes,
Parang
the
ganun yung,
agency hirings that may deprive them of their exercise of the right to organize. And also to mention that more than 6 million of our workers out of the 50 million are underemployed. So they have jobs, but they are not satisfied with it. They want to earn more through additional sources of income. And then more than 2 million are out of work.
Like sa BPO industry, parang impossible na makapag-form ka ng union doon. No? Kasi yung employer, parang hindi naman dito. Sa abroad.
Although as recently, we have already I think so, workers organization, other workers organization that is already organized the BPO workers.
There are
workers
labor
organizations,
unions. So how do you describe wage distortion in terms of the labor situation right now, sir?
The concept of wage distortion would always arise when it comes to wage increases, because the argument there was that if you increase the minimum wage of workers, then it may already destroy the gap between the minimum wage and then the second in level. So the higher level, if you have too small a gap between those two ranks of workers, then that would also have effect on the top level workers, because they would say that the minimum wage earner has increased wages, then we must also have an increase in wages. So that's the concept of wage distortion. That's why many of our legislation is across the board, because we say that if we compute further for wage distortion, that would take much time and effort. So let's just have an across the board wage hike. But later on, our regional wage boards were being very strict in saying that they have only power to adjust the minimum wage of workers. They don't have the power about the wages with regards to those in the upper echelons of the companies.
That's another problem, Kasi ang law ata ngayon, regional na yung adjustment ng wages. So how do you go about with the across the board proposal?
Yes, the Wage Rationalization Act established those regional wage boards to establish regional minimum wages, yet it does not preclude as well Congress to have a legislated wage hike. So that's why it's already being filed across. It just so happens that the last legislated wage hike was back in 1989, which established the regional wage boards. That's by the virtue of Wage Rationalization.
Alright.
I see.
So ano naman ang stand ng TUCP on the PUV modernization program?
Oh.
PUV modernization program is an issue that has many aspects with it. You have the climate change issue with it. You have also the most important is our workers, no, our
Workers.
jeepney drivers, as well
Mhm.
as our operators. That's why this issue once again was reinvigorated back when there are certain jeepney operators that launch a strike, which talks about the cause of the PUV modernization. The Trade Union Congress of the Philippines has always remained steadfast that we need to champion the welfare of our jeepney drivers. So one, we need to have better credit access for our jeepney drivers and operators to avail of these modern jeepneys, because that's one of the main problem they face, because this costs millions when in fact you have our traditional jeepneys that are only hundreds or hundreds of thousands. The second one is that we could not emphasize more the concept of what we call just transition. So the concept of just transition is that we better transition to better work setup. That's the case, for example, of climate change transition, which is in the case of PUV modernization, because we know we also want to modernize our jeepneys, not only for roadworthiness, but also in terms of pollution emission of our traditional jeepneys. But we would like to emphasize that there must be just transition. We help them transition to these modern jeepneys with the benefits they need, with the credit access they need, and so forth and so on.
Alright. So, probably this is going to be our last question. So,
Yeah.
napaka-interesting na lalo na yung wage distortion. So,
Yeah.
siguro we could, is it okay to just, expound on that behind the camera? Okay, so meron kasing alarming increase of, Filipinos victimized by, traffickers. They were duped into working abroad only to find out na hindi naman yun yung pre-namis sa kanila, and then they end up being online scammers. Actually mga na-deport na sila. So ano yung preemptive measure, or what has the TUCP done to put a stop?
Okay, so the Deputy Speaker Raymond Mendoza has been one of those who spearheaded the creation of our Department of Migrant Workers, the DMW, and we know that it is now the one home of all migrant workers. With the case of proactivity, we need to proactively address the constant human trafficking already. It has already become so prevalent, especially with the rise of digital platforms. Many of them are forced to crypto scams. So for us, we need to. There is a system in the Department of Migrant Workers which we call the blacklisting system. So if an agency has been this dismal track record of sending our Filipino workers, then it must be blacklisted and it must be prosecuted by our authorities as well. The second is that we need really to launch, we need to reinvigorate our embassies and labor attaches in those countries, so that while those scammers that are sending our Filipinos to other countries may not be prosecuted as soon as possible here in the country, but then in the other countries, when there are labor attaches that can easily be accessed by our workers there that are trapped, so that we can rescue them as soon as possible. Then third is that, let me also mention the rising cases which remains unaddressed, our OFWs that are suffering from harassment and violence as well.
Yeah,
And that is
that
also,
one.
since we have already mentioned the ILO Convention 190, so we hope that if the Philippines ratified it as the first Asian country to do so, then other countries will follow suit, and we could ensure minimum protection for our overseas Filipino workers. And so we believe that is a whole of government, a whole of nation approach with regards to saving our workers from abusive employment, especially abroad.
Okay. So, can we have your last words for our viewers?
Okay, since yesterday was May 1 Labor Day, so it is the day really of appreciating the workers' sacrifices, especially amid more difficult times. And the best way really to appreciate and to recognize the efforts of our workers is to listen to their demands. So we have amplified and we have aired our demands yesterday in Joint Labor Day mobilization. It is about better wages, that we need to provide new permanent and decent jobs. And lastly, we want to advance the labor rights of each and every Filipino workers. And the Trade Union Congress of the Philippines will always be there with you, especially through our Deputy Speaker Raymond Mendoza in Congress para sa bawat manggagawang Pilipino. Maraming salamat po at
Maraming
mabuhay po.
salamat, sir, for gracing our
Yeah,
this morning's episode.
We're glad that TUCP is always there to advance the rights of workers. So,
Thank you so much, and we'll be right back after we'll have a short break.
short break.
Viber is the free and secure way to connect with friends and family anywhere. Send messages and make phone and video calls for free. Download Viber now.
Iba ng panahon, ang dami ng bago ngayon. Pati ang mundo natin, well, nabago na rin. Buti ang bayan, bigger, better na. You can buy it sa centers, pati sa mga partners, may online pa at app. You can buy it with your fingers, still don't remittance and more. Online shopping, you can buy it all. Di magpadala, you can buy it all. Anumang pera transaction, you can buy it all.
Sabayan ang pagbabago ng mundo for all your pera transactions, all new by
With Globe, our steps can lead us to millions of doors opening, millions of paths unfolding, and millions of reasons to keep going. Now's the time to be with the network that gets better every day for you.
Nasa kamay mo ang swerte, ngunit hindi ito isang laro na para lang sa'yo. Dahil bukod sa pag-asang maging milyonaryo, ang pagtangkilik mo sa loto at ipapang produkto ng PCSO ay nakakalikom ng pondo para sa mga programang pangkalusugan, tulong at serbisyong medikal at kawang-gawa.
Lahat ng minimithi makakamtan sa PCSO.
Viber is the free and secure way to connect with friends and family anywhere. Send messages and make phone and video calls for free. Download Viber now.
Nasa kamay mo ang swerte, ngunit hindi ito isang laro na para lang sa'yo. Dahil bukod sa pag-asang maging milyonaryo, ang pagtangkilik mo sa loto at iba pang produkto ng PCSO ay nakakalikom ng pondo para sa mga programang pangkalusugan, tulong at serbisyong medikal at kawang-gawa.
Kasal, lahat ng minimithi makakamtan sa PCSO.
Hello. To complete the balance of the discussion, we have our second guest representing the employer section.
Sector, yeah.
Sector. Is joining us through Zoom.
Yes, Chito, his name is a household name in the business sector. I already encountered his name frequently when I was in the media more than 2 decades ago. Who would not know the name attached to the weekly press releases we receive from the Philippine Export Confederation, Incorporated?
Mga katribu, the president of the PhilExport and chairman of the Philippine Chamber of Commerce and Industry, and the honorary chairman of the and president of the Employers Confederation of the Philippines. He is none other than Mr. Sergio Ortiz Luis Jr. Good morning, sir.
Good morning to you and to our listeners.
Good morning, Mr. Ortiz Luis.
Yes, sir.
Welcome to
Good morning.
Straight Talk.
We have been covering you for so long. And we're glad that you're still working to advance the economy and the industries of our country.
Yes, but you confused my representation. I am
Why?
president of ECOP and chairman and honorary chairman only of PCCI now.
So, chairman of PCCI and president of ECOP. So sorry about
So,
Yes. On PhilExport, but I'm
PhilExport.
honorary chair and treasurer of PCCI.
So,
now.
treasurer.
meaning, sir,
Okay,
hindi
sorry.
hindi updated yung nasa internet.
Yes.
Oo nga.
Uh,
Yeah, what, sir, I just want to ask a question. What is the present state of labor in the Philippines?
Very, very good. After the pandemic, we are slowly recovering, but surely we are doing very well. Employment, in spite of the fact that about 800,000 to 1 million every year are new entrants who come of age and who graduates and enter the labor market. We're still able to maintain the unemployment rate quite well. No? Well, we should have it faster, and I think the government is doing its best to be able to attract investments, which will down to more employment and better employment.
Yes, sir.
Oh, incidentally, you will notice that there is quite a good industrial peace now in the country. You don't notice big strikes, and nowadays I don't remember if there is 2 or 3 strikes that happened now, in spite of the fact everybody was suffering during the pandemic. Because right now we have a good forum where we meet our labor counterpart. We have the leaders forum where time and again we meet with them, and that is why probably you will notice that there are some manifestos that we jointly signed with the labor group, which did not happen in the past. We have a very good relations with them. Maybe we differ in some areas, but we understand why we differ in some areas, stand in some areas.
The advantage of the country right now is the what they call as the demographic sweet spot, where where many of the population are of working age. So how do you see this working in terms of benefiting the economy, sir?
Well, there's just about 50 million people in the labor market now. And as I mentioned, about 800 to 1 million enters every year, no, to the labor market. We are able to maintain. There is a big discussion now about the the K to 12 graduates that being addressed. No? But what
Yes,
you're
sir.
saying, you have to understand that during the pandemic, a lot of companies closed, a lot of their workers stand by, waiting to be rehired, and that is being done.
Yes,
And
sir.
there are those who have experience or who are college graduates that are there, and therefore, hiring companies would give them priorities, and that is understandable.
Yes, sir.
Uh, I think being well, if they're going to pay the same salary, they would probably pick the best where there is no more learning curve involved, no? But nevertheless, I think the program of the government inviting investors and trying to relax some of the industries like the tourism, mining, agriculture, and the build program and our other infrastructure program. I think we should be able to address our unemployment rate the most.
Okay.
Sir, ano po ba ang ECOP? And ilang members meron ang ECOP?
Well, ECOP is under the law, is the recognized representative of employers. No, we have about 1,000 enterprise members, which is really basically the bigger ones. No, we don't have the micro industries in ECOP, but most of them are really in the chain of services that the companies in ECOP have. So they're in many times we have programs where big brothers, small brothers, and we try to address the problem also. Most of the time, also, ang mga walang representasyon ay yung mga informal sector. No? A lot of people do not realize that the informal sector in the economy is 84%. Yung
84.
organized
Malaki din yun.
4%. 16% lang yung formal sector.
Formal sector.
And that is why when we keep on talking about increasing salaries and wages, there is confusion because we're only talking of 16%. We're not talking about the 84%.
Okay.
Farmers, who will increase the salary of farmers even if you legislate? Market vendors, tricycle drivers, jeepney drivers, and there's a lot. These are 84% of the economy in the labor market. So, maganda sabihin kung minsan tataasan ang sweldo ng tao. Pero you have to remember, hindi ganong you have to address also the informal sector. Palayo ng palayo. The disparity between
disparity.
the formal sector and formal sector is getting bigger.
So, sir, how does ECOP advances the 16% that you said? The employer's interest in all labor, social, and employment issues.
For instance, during the pandemic,
Yes, sir.
we were trying to recover already. We came up with a project of 1 million jobs. And we signed agreement with the contractors and the manufacturers association, even the electronics, and with Dole, DTI, and NEDA, I think. And we were able to attain that, the 1 million jobs. last year we also tried to do another 1 million jobs, but then again, I think the 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 focus became more of trying to organize and the better jobs. I think that was the more appropriate thing to do. We also have training. We have a safety training and we try to help our members be able to comply with laws and we have arrangement with TESDA, for instance, for referrals and for the schools watching. That is what ECOP is doing.
Sir, yesterday was Labor Day celebration. So the workers, maraming workers, the labor groups, they went to the streets for several demands. So ang isang demand po ay ang magkaiba. Merong yung 750 na final ng Makabayan Block. Meron din pong yung 150 wage hike. So what is the stand of ECOP on this Labor Day demands?
We have a system, the tripartite wage board, which is not perfect, but it's the most objective and it's working. And so far, we are using it. The representation is the workers, the employers, and then the government, which is basically is the majority there with DTI, DOLE, and NEDA there. And they have all the information and all the processes where we can really assess what is needed. No? You will notice that there was a lot of filing that was done in Congress about salary and all. I think you will agree with me that that is not the best way to settle this issue because Congress is politicized, maybe emotional and sometimes subject of horse trading, and it can ruin the economy. The wage that was filed of 750 additional over what is existing now is 1.5 times the existing. I mean, that has no chance at all of being even considered now. And I wish that they would not do that because, number one, it affects foreign investors. If you're choosing between Thailand, Vietnam, and the Philippines, for instance, and you hear of those filing the 750, 1.5 times increase of the minimum wage, would you invest here? You'll probably go.
It's
This guy,
1.5 times.
it's unnecessary expectation, and
Yes,
probably among the workers, no, that if it's not approved, they feel that the government is not doing anything. But it's really unimaginable for the economy to be able to do that because they'll wreck the whole economy. Considering, of course, that the ones involved is only 16% of the economy.
Sir, yun sa 150 on the side of TUCP, how do you view this?
Final ni Subiri.
Well, as I said, it will go to the process, which is the tripartite board. It should go there, and it should be deliberated on, and whatever comes out, we will respect, and we will. But I mean, even that is, I think, something that is not wrong. You will notice in the past. When even the inflation rate is not dispatched now, there were increases that were given in the last year, and they were not in the vicinity, precisely because you have to determine also ano ba ang kaya ng industriya, ano ba yung magagawa na hindi maapektuhan din yung labor nababawasan pa yung mga nagtatrabaho sa madadagdagan. Alam mo, yung mga 90% of our industries are micro.
Micro.
The micro industries account for about 65 to 70% of employment. Yung mga micro, kalahati dyan ng pandemic nagsara. Marami rin hindi pa nagbubukas ngayon.
Yes,
No? And then you increase salaries like that. Marami rin hindi na magbubukas. Yung 13-month pay lang, marami rin hindi kayang bayaran.
Hindi na bigay. So ayaw nyo ng, I mean, you're not amenable to an across the board increase.
I'm just trying to put some realities. Ako, sinasabi ko, it will be discussed in the should be discussed in the tripartite at dun pag-usapan. Ayokong pangunahan kung ano. Sinasabi ko lang yung realities that are there. No? And there's also another reality is there is a confusion na people are saying, how can the minimum wage, how can a family of 4 or 5 live with the minimum wage? There is a confusion what the minimum wage is. Minimum wage in international parlance, even in International Labor Organization, is entry level for new entrants, meaning fresh graduates, those who come of age, so that hindi sila abusuhin ng mga kumpanya na bibigyan na ng konting allowance. Unfortunately, in a country like ours na medyo may problema pa rin sa employment, yung minimum wage na-apply to everybody.
To everyone.
No? Ang problema doon, hindi pareho ng living wage yun. Living wage is different from minimum wage. No? Sinasabi nila, dapat i-adjust yung minimum wage. What is living wage as against minimum wage? Living wage in a family, if there is another minimum wage earner, that is included. If the wife has a sideline, like titinda-tinda or ano, sama yun. Kung meron silang maliit na bakuran, meron silang chicken, bibe, baboy, vegetables, growing there, kasama yun. Yung mga ayuda, kagaya ng mga tupad, kasama yun. Ang binibigay ng gobyerno na libreng edukasyon, kasama yun. Kasama yan dyan yung healthcare system na binibigay ng gobyerno. Kasama yun. Buo ng living wage. Minimum wage is not the living wage.
Yung living wage parang nag-a-adjust sa inflation, bale.
Hindi nag-adjust. Kasama
Kasi
lahat
mataas
yung
yung
income
inflation.
ng pamilya
Yes,
na hindi natin binibilang, na sinasabi natin ang bubuhay sa pamilya. Hindi mo bubuhay talaga sa minimum wage ang pamilya na 4 or 5. Living wage ang pinag-uusapan. Akala no iba, yung minimum wage, living wage, hindi. Maraming kasama ang
living wage.
sa living wage. Pati yung mga tulong ng gobyerno, kasama yan. Yan ang living. That is why, nakakasurvive ang mga pamilya. Hindi tayo kagaya ro sa araw sa India, nakakamatay sa gutom yung mga tao. Dito, kahit paano nakakasurvive. Hindi ko sinasabi na sufficiente, meron mga malnourished, pero hindi naman ganun pagka inasa mo sa minimum wage, mamamatay sa gutom yung mga tao. Yun lang.
Sir, may warning, I mean, on the issue of wage hike, may warning yung mga economic managers. They said that an increase would affect the Philippines' competitiveness. How is that so?
Well, especially the micro. If you increase the salaries and the micro will have to comply, it has nothing to do with their sales, has nothing to do with their income. They just have to comply. So, what will they do? If they want to comply, they can, if the market can still absorb the price increase, they will put it on and pass it on to the consumer. Kung kaya pa ng merkado. Kung hindi naman, magbabawas ng tao yan para makakomply siya rin sa itataas sa sweldo na hindi naman niya kinikita pa. O kung talaga hindi pwedeng dalawang remedyo, magsasara na lang yan. And that is one of the greatest thing that hindi na realize sa mga tao. Plus, yun nga, sabi ko nga, kung ang covered sa formal market na 16%,
Yes,
at kung minimum wage earner lang, hindi 16% na, 10% lang ng 50 million ang minimum wage earner. Kung isasama mo yung across the board, sinasabi na kasama yung presidente, kasama yung German, kasama yung lahat, 16% yun. Pero kung minimum wage earner lang, 10% lang. Paano na yung farmers? Pagka tataas yung mga presyo, paano na yung mga hindi wala nagsusweldo? Saan huhugutin yung tataas na yun? Yung unang ang masama. Tayo may mga programa ng gobyerno, tulong sa delivery driver, tulong sa mga ibang informal sector, yung tupad, no? Ganong kalayo ang aabutin ng mga tupad yan? Bilyon-bilyon yan kung sustain ito. Tataas mo yung susundan mo sa yung informal market, bibigyan mo rin ganun taas ng ayuda, hindi kaya ng gobyerno yan.
Sir, for the benefit of our viewers, how would you differentiate a micro enterprise, a small enterprise, and a medium enterprise?
And a large
And
enterprise.
a large enterprise.
Yung micro enterprise natin, according to yung sinusunod sa DTI, I think is a capitalization of 3 million to 15 million. Yung small,
Micro.
15 million to 100 million yata. Over 100 million to certain medium, and then yung large, yung talagang malaki. Ito ang distribution naman, no?
Yes, sir.
Ang
In
micro
distribution.
is 90%.
Oh.
Yung small is a little over 8%. No? Yung medium is 1%. Yung large is less than 1%. Ang contribution sa of course, yung large and medium, 30% sa economy yan ang contribution. Yung SME, nasa 70%. Pero ang employment, halos talo sa SMEs. So, yun ang distribution, yun ang realities. Pag sinasabi, kaya ng mga kumpanya yan, of course, yung medium, tsaka yung large, kaya yan. Kumikita yan, malaking kinikita. Sa matter of fact, malaki na palaki kaya mga yan, naiipos sa kanila. But that is the reality. That is the essence of a free society and democracy. So, hindi mo pwede naman parusahan yung malalaki dahil lumayaman sila legitimately. So, ang problema, yung SME,
Yung 90%.
Our SME in Asia is the most underbanked SME in the whole of Asia.
98.
Kulang tulong.
Yes, sir.
Sir, may representation ba ang ECOP sa Regional Tripartite Wages and Productivity Board?
Meron kami representation. Lahat ng board. Meron isa ang lahat ng board. Meron isa ang representative ng labor. Meron isa ang representative ang employers. Meron isa ang representative ng DOLE, NEDA, tsaka majority government. So talagang hihimaya. Kaya magkasundo kami ng labor, kaya maghiwalay kami ng labor, at the end of the day, kung ano yung magiging desisyon ng mga gobyerno, yun ang mag-predominate. Kasi most of the time, they agree with each other. Tinitingnan nila yung totality. Walang emosyon yun. Yun talaga realities. Yun ang nag-ano. So it doesn't matter kung ano stand namin, ano stand ng labor. At the end of the day, sila yung nagbabalante.
So what do you think should be the compromise that employers can offer instead of a wage increase? How much wage increases can business afford?
Well,
if you
that's a bit to say, i-compromise, yung malalaki, more than what hinihingi nila minabayad pero maliit lang yun. Yung i-compromise ko sa micro, tsaka sa small, hirap na hirap yung mga yan.
Galing COVID.
Kahit pagka tinanong mo yung mga migrant, kahit piso, hindi papayag yan. Dahil sabi niya sa'yo, yung pasweldo lang nila. Problema yan, linggo-linggo o buwan-buwan.
Correct.
Yung mga Dutch, yung mga small, marami rin, medyo malaki
They're
na rin.
still struggling after COVID.
Struggling lahat yan. Yung malalaki talagang, hindi mo po pwede siya, naku, bigay tayo mga kumpanya na yan. Kinakatwiran lang niya, huwag mabawasan na kita ng Dutch na to. Kaya yung merong mga collective bargaining, na nakikipag-negotiate, lalo na sa maliit na kumpanya, mas malaki pa nakukuha noong yearly increase to tripartite board kaysa nakukuha lang. Kasi pag nagpalad ng papeles, yung mga maliliit ako, nalulugi pa yung marami. Well, bibigyan sila ng increase 5 piso, gano'n.
Yes,
Kung
sir.
meron man. Di ba, hindi naman mabigyan na dahil palaran ng papeles. Pero, doon sa tripartite board, kahit paano, tinutulak na kahit paano yung sinasagat kung anong kaya na ekonomiya.
So that's a more suitable approach.
Oo. Sir, meron kang recent interview before the Labor Day. You said that ito yung bill na final ng Makabayan na yung subsidy, provision ng subsidy. So, you said na the government cannot afford the subsidy to subsidize the 90% yung micro and small enterprises dahil pwedeng magkakaroon ng cut-off o magkakaroon ng magsasara ang kumpanya o mawawala ng trabaho. So considering na sabi niyo din sir that yung 2,000 na binibigay na gobyerno or 9.3 under dun sa cash transfer program, ilan po sa mga micro and small enterprises ba ang meron sa buong Pilipinas? Sabi niyo po 90%. So kung i-quantify po natin yun, ilan po yun?
90% of 50 million.
So that's around
So 50 million are the number of
45 million.
workers.
Or is the labor market.
Opo. So ilan po ba ang micro and small enterprises?
90% ng 50 million.
Okay.
So workers.
Sa workers po.
Yeah.
Okay. So,
Kaya, kung bibigyan mo naman yung informal sector, 100 pesos, yung informal market, ilagay mo sa 86%, ilagay mo sa 90%. O 100 pesos sa 90% ng 50 million, araw-araw ibabayaran. Kaya ba ng gobyerno yan? Trillion yun.
Sir, yung absorption ng mga laborers sa economy, like the yearly graduates, na-accommodate ba ng businesses?
Well, yun na isang pinagdidibatihan ngayon, kaya pati yung K-12 pinagtatalunan eh.
Yes, sir.
Dahil medyo in the order of priorities, siyempre, nag-hire yung mga pareho lang ibabayad doon. Ba't ka naman kukuha ng bagong graduate walang experience? Sila kahuli lang kinukuha. That is why, hindi mo ma-legislate na sila ang hired. Kasi, pag sinabi mo, dapat i-force yung mga kumpanya mag-hire ng fresh graduate. Alam mo, kung maraming naghahanap ng trabaho, kulang ang trabaho, pag sinabi mo si Juan, i-legislate mo na kailangan magtrabaho, si Pedro mawawala ng trabaho. Pareho rin. From the point of view of the economy of the country, pinipilit mo lang na bigyan ng priority yung pero merong mawawala ng trabaho. So, yun lang yun. So, that should, wala kang choice, kundi, papayaan mo na lang yung kumpanya nag-hire kung sino between Pedro and Juan ang hahire niya.
Yeah.
So, meron pa rin
Dilemma.
So, yung pa rin ang problema, sir. So, given the thousands of graduates we have every year, tapos yung availability naman ng trabaho for the fresh graduates, wala. So, kaya nagkakaroon tayo ng mataas na
Pero alam mo,
unemployment.
I should not, I'm very hopeful. Kasi, nami-maintain natin yung
Right.
unemployment in spite of that, no? Ah, alam mo, tama naman yung programa natin, maghanap ng mga investors.
Investors, yes.
Kaya kami, anything na makata-turn off sa investors, inaano namin kaagad na wag dating gawin, ano? Yung mga pinafile na mga unreasonable isa sa mga sinasabi kasi ng investors medyo erratic yung labor law sa Pilipinas. As a matter of fact, medyo archaic na, no? Yun ang isang inaano. Pero yung group na yun, no, yung mga programa ngayon, yung infrastructure, bill, yan, maraming employment na na-generate. At yung plus yung investors. Kaya ako, I admire the president. He's taking time talagang to invite maraming criticism. Pero ako nakita ko yung research yung biyahe sa China. Unfortunately, at the last moment, I was not able to go. I would consider those who are especially private sector as heroes. Kasi pumunta sila ron to yung ang lamig-lamig, yung below zero. Tapos may COVID, tapos sila naman kinulong lang sa kwarto. At pagka may meeting
Sa
lang,
China.
silang PC na nagtetest ng dahil lalabas ka, tinetesting ka, hindi biro yung ginagawa na yan.
Yes,
Saka yung hirap. So talagang kailangan gawin at the end of the day, talagang kung wala investor, hindi tayo makaka-create ng jobs.
Sir, yung sa amendment sa Constitution, would you think na papabor yan sa pag-attract ng investments?
Lahat naman dyan. Kaya lang, divided kami sa business sector, dyan sa, kasi magagawa naman kahit hindi mo i-amend yung Constitution.
I see.
Magagawa naman yun marami natatakot doon sa ano ba isasama nila pag i-amend yung Constitution.
Pag binuksan na yung Constitution.
Yun ang malaking debate sa amin even among us in the business sector.
Yes,
Maraming natatakot doon sa yung pagka kasi inumpisa mo yan, all bets are off. Ika nga. Binuksan mo na yung Pandora's box, di ba? Alam ko, papasok mga political aspect dyan. So, divided kami yan.
Sir, yung about the PUB modernization program, what's
Anong
your take?
thoughts mo, sir,
Yes,
on the PUV modernization program?
Ito yung sasakyan?
Opo,
Sasakyan.
sa mga jeep.
Oh.
Alam mo, noong kasalukuyan, noong pandemya, nung mag-umpisa na magluwag, na yung mga jeepney drivers na mamalimos, walang magawa, Kami, nag-joint letter kami sa business sector. Sinabi namin, bakit ba, hirap na hirap ang taong sumakay, ang namin ng sasakyan, inuuna pa yung modernization, samantalang pwede naman, lahat ng may franchise patakbuhin mo. At total, yung like it was before, hindi naman sinunod. Ano mga pinagagawa? Kaya ako very critical sa DOTR ron inumpisahan yung beef, wala lang ang papasahin tao pag bibili mo pa ng beef card, kaya kagulo-gulo, di ba?
Yes,
Kahawa. Sumunod, introduce yung RFID, yung sasakyan, na hindi naman kagulo-gulo, buti lang, hinarap. Ini-introduce pa yung investment, yung pinipilit kayo modernization ng jeep tsaka modernization ng bus. Kung ano pati nga yung inspection ng vehicles na napakamahal. Pinapasok, Pati nga yung upuan ng bata gusto i-implement Ang ginagawang katwiran palagi yung pandemya Lahat yun na pinagagawa, especially modernization ng jeep. Sinasabi namin, bakit ba yung pinipilit? Ngayon, even now, we have been saying, pinipilit yung modernization. Ang ginawa naman yun, hindi naman consultation, inuutusan lang ito yung gagawin nyo Kahit hindi sila kikita. Ngayon, it's turning out na hindi kikita. Alam mo yan, they should revisit that. Ako, believe ako sa in-appoint na bagong DOT Secretary, I think he understands. I think they're trying to, yung mga pumupunta ka ng problema ngayon, kagaya niya sa airport na yan, yung sa nakaraang administrasyon yan, yung sa nakaraang DOTR yan. Ito paligay ko, nagagawa ng remedyo yan. And basically, kami nung nag-strike mo, sinasabi namin, hindi naman kailangan mangyari yan eh. Kausapin lang yun na ano yung reasonable, yun ang gawin.
Sir, digitalization daw kailangan ng gobyerno
Alam
para
mo,
mas
yung
mas
digitalization
bumilis
yan eh,
ang service.
overuse siya ano na yan, pati sa pera, pati sa digitalize. Doon siya sa utang, central bank, sagot, digitalize natin, dadami ba ang pera mo kung naka-digital ka? Ang dami-dami yan, hindi mo pag-digital na hindi naman naintindihan kung ano yan eh.
Yes.
That is useful, but that is not the solution.
Okay.
Sir, balik tayo sa ECOP. Sir. So ano po ang mga initiatives ng ECOP ngayon to help its member enterprises?
Well, kami, tuloy yung namin na meron kami tripartite na mga representasyon sa agencies, sa labor, employers, na tripartite. Dapat yung mga ina-appoint, nino-nominate ng labor tsaka ng hindi na susunod ng araw yun eh. Kaya marami rin sa mga departamento na dapat may pakialaman labor employers ngayon mukhang sinusunod na nila. Pero dati that is one because makakatulong sa mga yung inputs namin doon. Wala yung drive for yung efficiency ng yung matching sa mga eskwelahan, sa mga kumpanya, inaano namin yun para mabawasan yung mga mismatch.
So can we, as much as we want to prolong this conversation, can we have your last words for our viewers, Mr. Sergio Ortiz Luis?
Well, in the past, we have looked at labor and employers as para ba magkalaban, no? Now we are partners, and they realize that, and we realize it. At ngayon, nag-uusap-usap kami, marami kami na hindi. So, tutuloy natin itong cooperation in industrial peace will prosper in the country.
So,
All right.
thank you very much.
Thank you so much for your time, Mr. Ortiz Luis, and the president of the Employers Confederation of the Philippines Incorporated. Thank you so much po.
And thank you.
Sige po. Thank you. Maraming
Thank you,
salamat.
sir. Thank you, mga ka-tribu. Tune in again next Tuesday for another episode of Straight Talk. I am Chito Lozada.
Once again, I'm Gigi Arcilia. Watch Straight Talk live every Tuesday at 10 a.m. on Daily Tribune's Facebook page and Tribune Now on YouTube.